Sometimes the things we carry without understanding become the things that change our lives forever. I did not know that on the morning I walked into Romano Market. To me, it was just another stop on an ordinary Saturday. Another errand before returning home to grade papers for my students. The autumn air outside was cool, but the supermarket welcomed customers with warm lighting, polished floors, and shelves arranged with almost impossible perfection. Romano Market was not an ordinary grocery store. Everyone in Manhattan knew that. The produce looked like it belonged in magazines. The bakery smelled like fresh memories. Even the shopping carts moved quietly across the floor. Everything felt intentional, designed, expensive. I adjusted the strap of my purse and moved through the entrance. Around me, families compared shopping lists. Couples discussed dinner plans. Employees greeted customers with practiced smiles. It felt peaceful, normal, exactly what I needed after a difficult week. My fingers slipped inside my coat pocket and touched the old envelope I had been carrying for 3 days. The paper was worn and slightly faded. I had discovered it while cleaning my late mother's storage boxes in the basement of my apartment building. At first, I almost threw it away. Then I noticed there was something inside. A photograph. Nothing more. Yet for some reason I could not stop thinking about it. The envelope had no name, no date, no explanation. Just a photograph of several people standing in front of a building I did not recognize. One woman stood near the center. Her face seemed familiar, though I could not explain why. I had spent 3 nights studying the image. 3 nights trying to remember where I had seen her before. Every attempt failed, yet something kept telling me the photograph mattered. I passed the bakery section and paused long enough to pick up a loaf of sourdough bread. Nearby, a child laughed while helping his father choose apples. Soft music played through hidden speakers above the aisles. Everything felt calm. Then my phone vibrated. A message from my school principal appeared on the screen. Nothing urgent, just a reminder about Monday's faculty meeting. I smiled and slipped the phone back into my purse. The smile faded almost immediately. A strange dizziness brushed against me. Light, brief, easy to ignore. I continued walking. 10 seconds later it returned. Stronger this time. I stopped beside a display of seasonal flowers and took a slow breath. Maybe I had skipped breakfast. Maybe I needed coffee. Whatever the reason, the sensation refused to disappear. The lights overhead seemed brighter. The sounds around me felt farther away. My fingers tightened around the old envelope inside my pocket. Across the supermarket, several floors above the shopping area, a private executive office overlooked the entire building through discrete glass panels. A man stood there reviewing reports while employees moved throughout the market below. He rarely paid attention to individual customers. Today was different. Something on the security monitors caught his eye. He looked closer. Down on the main floor. I tried taking another step. The world shifted unexpectedly. The flower display blurred. Conversations faded. My heartbeat became louder than everything else. I reached for the edge of a nearby shelf, but the dizziness arrived too quickly. The envelope slipped partially from my pocket. A photograph slid halfway into view. Then everything around me dissolved into fragments of light and sound. The last thing I remember hearing was a distant voice asking if someone should call for assistance. Several floors above, Adrian Romano stepped closer to the glass overlooking the supermarket floor. His eyes settled on the young woman lying below. Then his attention moved to the photograph that had fallen beside her. For the first time that day, his expression changed. He picked up the phone on his desk and gave only one order. Bring her to my office. The first thing I noticed was the smell of fresh coffee. The second was silence. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of a place where every detail existed for a reason. I opened my eyes slowly. Soft afternoon light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. For several seconds, I simply stared at the ceiling, trying to remember where I was. Then the memories returned. Romano Market. The flowers. The dizziness. The photograph. My hand immediately moved toward my coat pocket. Empty. My pulse quickened. I sat up too fast and instantly regretted it. The room tilted before settling again. You should probably wait a minute before doing that. The voice came from across the room. Calm. Deep. Controlled. I turned toward the sound. A man stood beside a large walnut desk reviewing documents on a tablet. Dark suit. White shirt. No tie. Everything about him suggested confidence without effort. He looked up briefly before setting the tablet aside. Where am I? I asked. My office. His answer somehow created more questions than it answered. Your office? He nodded once. Adrian Romano. Even through my confusion, I recognized the name immediately. Newspapers covered his business empire. Business magazines featured him regularly. Some people described him as a visionary entrepreneur. Others described him as a man whose influence reached far beyond the companies carrying his name. Henna Brooks, I said quietly. One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. I know. The response made me nervous for reasons I could not explain. Adrian walked toward a nearby table and poured a glass of water. He placed it beside me. The doctor says you are fine. Dehydration, stress, lack of sleep. Embarrassment settled over me immediately. I am sorry. For what? Creating a scene in your supermarket. Adrian looked out the window for a moment. The supermarket survived. Despite myself, I laughed softly. The tension eased slightly. Then I remembered the envelope. My photograph. Adrian's expression changed almost imperceptibly. You mean this? He reached toward the desk and lifted the worn envelope. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. I accepted it carefully and immediately checked the contents. The photograph remained inside exactly as I remembered, yet something felt different. Adrian was watching it. Not casually. Intently. Where did you get it? He asked. My mother's storage boxes. His eyes narrowed slightly. Recently. 3 days ago. Silence filled the room. Adrian extended his hand. May I? After a brief hesitation, I handed him the photograph. He studied it beneath the light. His gaze settled on the woman standing near the center of the image. The reaction was immediate. Not dramatic. Just enough for me to notice. You know her? Adrian remained silent for several seconds. Then he looked directly at me. I know who she is. My heartbeat accelerated. Who? He turned the photograph over. I had never bothered to examine the back carefully before. Faded handwriting covered one corner. Adrian traced the letters with his thumb. That is impossible, he said quietly. What is? For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he handed the photograph back to me and pointed toward the faded writing. I leaned closer. Beneath years of wear and discoloration, a name became visible for the first time. Eleanor Whitmore. The room suddenly felt smaller. Adrian's eyes never left the photograph. That woman disappeared from public life 12 years ago. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The photograph rested between my hands while late afternoon sunlight stretched across Adrian's office floor. Eleanor Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me. Yet the reaction it created in Adrian told me it should have. I looked again at the faded image. The woman standing near the center appeared confident. Kind. Familiar in a way I could not explain. Who was she? I finally asked. Adrian walked toward the window overlooking Manhattan. Hundreds of people moved through the city below, completely unaware that a forgotten photograph had just changed the course of my day. Most people would not recognize the name anymore, he said quietly. 12 years ago they would have. I frowned. Why? Adrian turned back toward me. Because Eleanor Whitmore helped create one of the largest private education initiatives in the state. My attention sharpened immediately. Education. The word alone was enough to capture my interest. She worked with schools. She funded them. Adrian crossed the room and opened a cabinet beside his desk. After a moment, he removed a thin folder and placed it on the table between us. Look. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and event programs. Every article mentioned the same woman. Eleanor Whitmore. Scholarship programs. Community learning centers. Youth mentorship initiatives. The more I read, the stranger everything felt. Why have I never heard of her? Adrian folded his arms. Because her name disappeared from public records 12 years ago. A chill moved through me. Disappeared, along with several projects connected to her foundation. I looked down at the photograph again. Suddenly it felt much more important than an old family keepsake. Do you think my mother knew her? Adrian's eyes settled on the image. I think your mother knew her very well. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the office door. A woman in a navy business suit entered carrying a tablet. She moved with calm efficiency. Mr. Romano. Adrian nodded. What is it? She handed him the device. The archive search is complete. Adrian reviewed the screen for several moments. His expression remained controlled, but something about his silence immediately caught my attention. What? I asked. He looked toward me. The photograph was taken at a community center opening 11 years ago. And Adrian turned the tablet around. An enlarged version of the same photograph appeared on the screen. This time the image had been digitally enhanced. Details hidden by age were suddenly visible. People, faces, background signs. Then I noticed something else. Someone standing directly beside Eleanor Whitmore. My breath caught. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same eyes, same smile, same features. Younger, but unmistakably familiar. That is impossible, I whispered. Adrian remained silent. I stared at the woman in the photograph. Then I looked back at the image again. That is my mother. The room fell completely silent. Even the city beyond the windows seemed to disappear. Adrian's assistant looked between us. There is something else, she said quietly. Adrian nodded once. Show her. The screen changed again. A scanned document appeared. Most of the text was faded. Only one section remained perfectly clear. I felt my heartbeat accelerate as I read the line. Emergency contact, Sarah Brooks. My mother's name. Then beneath it sat another entry that made the room suddenly feel much smaller. Beneficiary designation, Hannah Brooks. For several moments, I simply stared at the screen. Beneficiary designation, Hannah Brooks. My name looked unreal sitting inside a document created more than a decade ago. The conference room seemed quieter than before. Even the sounds of the city beyond the glass windows felt distant. There has to be a mistake, I whispered. Adrian remained standing beside the table, studying the document carefully. The records were authenticated this morning. I looked at him. You are saying Eleanor Whitmore knew who I was when I was a child? That is exactly what this document suggests. My thoughts raced. My mother had never mentioned Eleanor Whitmore. Not once. Yet somehow she appeared in photographs with her, shared projects with her, listed me as a beneficiary in foundation records. None of it made sense. Adrian's assistant tapped another file on the tablet. Additional documents appeared. Meeting schedules, foundation reports, scholarship records. Every page connected Eleanor Whitmore to community education programs across New York. Then another name appeared repeatedly. Sarah Brooks. My mother. The realization settled heavily inside me. My mother had not merely known Eleanor. She had worked beside her. Why would she never tell me? I asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Adrian spoke. Maybe she intended to. I looked toward him, and his expression softened slightly. Life does not always give people as much time as they expect. The truth of that statement hurt more than I wanted to admit. My mother had passed away 3 years earlier after a brief illness. There had been conversations we never finished. Stories she never had the chance to tell. Maybe this was one of them. A vibration interrupted my thoughts. My phone lit up on the conference table. Unknown number. My pulse immediately accelerated. Do not answer yet, Adrian said. I looked toward him. Why? He was already watching the screen. Because whoever is contacting you chose this exact moment. The phone vibrated again. Same number. Same silence. Finally, a text message appeared. I opened it carefully. The message contained only one sentence. Some photographs were hidden for a reason. A chill moved through me. Adrian read the message over my shoulder. His expression became thoughtful. That is not a threat. It feels strange enough. Yes. He nodded. But whoever sent it wants your attention, not your fear. Before I could respond, another message appeared. This one included an attachment. A scanned photograph. My hands tightened around the phone as the image loaded. It showed Eleanor Whitmore standing outside a community learning center beside several volunteers. I immediately recognized one of them. My mother. But that was not what caught my attention. A sign hung above the entrance. Whitmore Learning Initiative. Beneath it, another smaller plaque was partially visible. Adrian leaned closer. Can you zoom in? I enlarged the image. The plaque became clearer. Dedicated to future generations. Then below it sat a handwritten inscription. The image quality was poor, but one word remained perfectly legible. Brooks. My heart skipped. That cannot be a coincidence. Adrian was already studying the photograph. No, his voice was calm. Certain. It is not. Silence settled over the room once again. Then Adrian's assistant received a notification on her tablet. She frowned slightly while reviewing it. Mr. Romano. Adrian looked up. What is it? Someone just requested access to the sealed Whitmore Foundation archives. The room became still. Who? Adrian asked. The assistant looked down at the screen, then back toward us. The request was submitted 20 minutes ago. My stomach tightened. By whom? The assistant swallowed once before answering. by someone using Hannah Brooks's name. The room seemed to shrink around me. My name echoed in my mind long after Adrian's assistant finished speaking. Someone had submitted a request using my identity. Someone who apparently knew about the Whitmore Foundation before I did. That is impossible, I said. I have never even heard of the archives until today. Adrian's expression remained calm, but I noticed the way his attention sharpened. He was already thinking several steps ahead. Can you trace where the request originated? He asked. His assistant nodded and immediately began working on the tablet. I looked down at my phone again. The anonymous messages. The photographs. The foundation records. Everything felt connected somehow, but the pieces refused to fit together. Why would someone use my name? I asked quietly. Adrian sat across from me. Because your name means something to them. I do not even know what it means to me. The honesty of the statement surprised both of us. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian reached toward the photograph lying on the conference table. Your mother spent years working alongside Eleanor Whitmore. His finger rested on the image. People do not create beneficiary designations for strangers. I stared at the photograph. The more I looked at it, the more questions appeared. What had my mother been involved in? Why had she hidden it? And why was someone suddenly trying to access information through me? Another message appeared on my phone. This time my pulse barely had time to react before Adrian noticed it. The screen displayed a single sentence. The archive contains what Eleanor could never finish. I swallowed. This person knows everything. Adrian studied the message, or wants us to believe that. Before I could respond, his assistant looked up from the tablet. I found something. We both turned toward her. The access request originated from a public computer terminal. Where? Adrian asked. Brooklyn Public Library. That answer somehow made everything stranger. Not a private office. Not a corporation. A library. Was there security footage? Adrian asked. Requested already. She hesitated. There is something else. The room became still again. The request included a verification phrase. Adrian folded his arms. What phrase? The assistant turned the screen toward us. For words appeared across the display. For future generations only. My breath caught immediately. The exact same words from the plaque beneath the Learning Center photograph. Adrian noticed my reaction. You have seen it before. On the picture from the text message. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Adrian leaned back in his chair. That means whoever sent the message also submitted the archive request. Why? I asked. Because they wanted us to follow the trail. His answer made unsettling sense. Every clue had arrived exactly when we needed it. Almost as if someone was guiding us. My phone vibrated once more. Another message. Another photograph. This image showed a locked room lined with shelves filled with boxes. An archive. At the bottom sat a timestamp from only 2 hours earlier. Beneath the image appeared a final line. Tomorrow at 10. The truth is waiting. My heart pounded. Adrian looked at the message, then at me. For the first time since I met him, his voice carried absolute certainty. You are not going alone. Before I could answer, his assistant received a new notification. Her expression changed instantly. Mr. Romano. Adrian turned. What now? She stared at the screen. The archive director just responded. My stomach tightened. What did they say? The assistant looked directly at me. They have been expecting Hannah Brooks for almost 11 years. The drive home felt strangely unreal. By the time I left Adrian's office, Manhattan had transformed into a sea of lights beneath the evening sky. Yet my thoughts remained trapped inside a single sentence. They have been expecting Hannah Brooks for almost 11 years. I must have replayed those words 100 times before reaching my apartment. Nothing about them made sense. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The familiar surroundings should have comforted me. Instead, they felt different now. Smaller somehow. As if the life I understood that morning belonged to someone else. My phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. No anonymous messages. No mysterious photographs. No new clues. The absence felt almost louder than the messages themselves. Around midnight, I opened the storage box where I had found the photograph. For 3 years it had sat untouched among my mother's belongings. Old books, greeting cards, family pictures, ordinary memories. I carefully searched through every folder and envelope. Most contained exactly what I expected. Then I found something new. Tucked inside a worn notebook was a folded piece of paper. My pulse quickened immediately. The handwriting belonged to my mother. I recognized it instantly. The note contained only a few lines. If Hannah ever asks about Eleanor, tell her the future was always meant to be hers. I stared at the page for several seconds. The words felt impossible, as though my mother had somehow anticipated this exact moment years earlier. Sleep became impossible after that. By sunrise, I was already dressed and ready to leave. Adrian arrived precisely at 9 o'clock. His black sedan waited outside my building while Manhattan slowly woke around us. The moment I entered the car, he glanced toward me. "You did not sleep. Was it that obvious?" One corner of his mouth moved slightly. "Very. Despite everything," I smiled. The drive to Brooklyn took less than 30 minutes. The archive building occupied part of an old library complex renovated years earlier. Nothing about it appeared extraordinary. Red brick, tall windows, quiet streets. Yet the moment we arrived, I felt something shift, as if invisible threads connecting the past and present were pulling tighter. A woman greeted us at the entrance. Late 60s, gray hair, warm expression. The moment she saw me, her eyes softened. "Hannah Brooks." It was not a question. "Yes." She smiled. "I have waited a long time to meet you." My heartbeat accelerated again. Adrian noticed. Without saying anything, he stepped slightly closer beside me. The gesture was subtle, protective, reassuring. The woman introduced herself as Margaret Ellis, director of the archive. She guided us through quiet hallways lined with historical photographs and foundation records. Finally, we reached a private room at the end of the corridor. A single archive box sat on the table. My name appeared across the front in neat handwriting. Hannah Brooks. Prepared September 18th, 11 years ago. The room became completely silent. Eleanor left instructions, Margaret said gently. "This box was never to be opened by anyone except you." I stared at it. My hands suddenly felt unsteady. 11 years. Someone had prepared this long before I understood any of it. Margaret stepped back respectfully. Adrian remained beside me. "Whenever you are ready." Slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside sat photographs, letters, foundation documents, and one sealed envelope resting on top of everything else. Across the front appeared 6 handwritten words. "For Hannah, when the time is right." My breath caught immediately. Then I noticed something else beneath the envelope. A photograph I had never seen before. My mother, Eleanor Whitmore, and standing between them was a young girl holding both of their hands. The young girl was me. For several seconds, I could not breathe. The photograph trembled in my hands as I stared at the smiling child standing between Eleanor Whitmore and my mother. There was no doubt. The little girl was me. My blonde hair was tied back in the same uneven ponytail my mother used to make before school. The small denim jacket was one I remembered wearing in old family pictures. Somehow, years before I discovered the photograph in the supermarket, before the anonymous messages, before any of this began, I had already met Eleanor Whitmore. "I do not understand," I whispered. Margaret Ellis sat quietly across the room. Adrian remained beside me, allowing me space to absorb what I was seeing. Finally, I reached for the sealed envelope resting inside the archive box. "For Hannah, when the time is right." The handwriting was elegant, careful, personal. My fingers hesitated for only a moment before opening it. Inside was a letter. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the words remained perfectly clear. "Dear Hannah, if you are reading this, then life has finally brought you back to the path your mother and I hoped you would one day find." My eyes immediately filled with tears. The room disappeared around me as I continued reading. Eleanor described meeting my mother nearly 20 years earlier while volunteering at a literacy program. Together, they had built community education projects that expanded far beyond their original plans. They shared the same belief. That opportunity could change a life. That kindness could create a future. Then the letter revealed something I never expected. When I was 6 years old, my mother occasionally brought me to foundation events. Eleanor knew me personally. She wrote about my curiosity, my endless questions, and the way I insisted on helping organize books even when they were already perfectly arranged. A faint laugh escaped me through the tears. That sounded exactly like something I would have done. Then I reached the section that changed everything. Eleanor explained that the Whitmore Learning Initiative had never truly ended. Publicly, the organization disappeared. Privately, it continued operating through partnerships, scholarships, and community programs hidden from unnecessary attention. Thousands of students had benefited over the years. Hundreds of schools had received support. The mission survived. "She never stopped," I whispered. Margaret smiled softly. No, she never did. I looked back at the letter. Eleanor continued explaining why my name appeared as a beneficiary. It had never been about money. It had never been about inheritance. It was about stewardship, responsibility, continuation. She and my mother believed that one day I might choose to help guide the initiative into its next chapter. Not because I was obligated, because I believed in the same values. The realization settled heavily and beautifully at the same time. My entire life as a teacher suddenly felt connected to something larger than I had ever imagined. Adrian quietly picked up another document from the box. Hannah. I looked toward him. He handed me a foundation report. Attached to the front was a photograph taken only 8 months earlier. My pulse quickened immediately. The image showed a community learning center operating under a different name. Children filled classrooms. Volunteers worked beside teachers. The mission was still alive. Then I noticed the signature at the bottom of the report. Eleanor Whitmore. Recent. Current. My heart nearly stopped. I looked at Margaret. She is alive. The older woman smiled gently. Yes. Silence filled the room. Then she reached into a drawer beside the archive table and removed a small card. She placed it carefully in front of me. An address was written across the front. I stared at it. What is this? Margaret's smile widened slightly. The place where Eleanor Whitmore has been waiting to meet you. The address remained in my hand the entire drive back to Manhattan. Even after we left the archive. Even after the city skyline appeared in the distance. My fingers refused to let it go. Eleanor Whitmore was alive. The woman whose photograph had somehow connected my mother, my childhood, and a forgotten educational mission was not a mystery from the past. She was a real person waiting somewhere beyond that address. The realization felt impossible. Adrian drove quietly beside me. The late afternoon sun reflected across the windshield while traffic moved steadily around us. Neither of us seemed eager to break the silence. Finally, I looked down at the card again. Do you think she knows I found the archives? Adrian glanced toward me briefly. If she left instructions for 11 years, I suspect she knows more than either of us. Despite everything, I smiled. The answer felt accurate. We reached Manhattan shortly before sunset. I expected to spend the evening sorting through everything I had learned. Instead, the moment I entered my apartment building, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. My pulse immediately accelerated. Another message. I opened it. This time there was no photograph. No clue. Only a simple sentence. Tomorrow is the day she hoped would come. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Trust your heart more than your fears. For the first time since the messages began, I no longer felt unsettled. Instead, I felt strangely comforted. Whoever had been guiding me through this journey wanted me to reach the truth. The next morning arrived beneath clear blue skies. I barely slept. By 8 o'clock, I was already standing near the window watching the city wake beneath me. At precisely 9, Adrian arrived. He did not ask whether I was ready. He already knew the answer. The address led US north of the city. The farther we traveled, the quieter the roads became. Towering buildings slowly gave way to rolling hills, open fields, and clusters of autumn trees glowing with gold and orange leaves. Everything felt peaceful, almost timeless. After nearly 3 hours, Adrian turned onto a narrow road lined with maples. At the end stood a white farmhouse surrounded by gardens and stone pathways. My heartbeat immediately quickened. This is it. Adrian parked the car and looked toward me. You do not have to do this alone. The simple statement carried more comfort than he probably realized. Together we stepped out into the crisp morning air. A light breeze moved through the trees. Wind chimes somewhere near the house created soft music. For several moments, nothing happened. Then the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch. Her hair carried more silver than it did in the photographs. Fine lines framed her eyes. Yet there was no mistaking her. Eleanor Whitmore. Every photograph, every archive, every clue, every unanswered question, they all led here. My eyes immediately filled with tears. Across the yard, Eleanor smiled. Not the smile of someone meeting a stranger. The smile of someone welcoming family home. She slowly descended the porch steps and stopped a few feet away. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her coat pocket and removed a small photograph. The same childhood picture from the archive. The one showing my mother, Eleanor, and me standing together. Her voice trembled slightly when she finally spoke. You still have the same eyes. Tears escaped before I could stop them. Eleanor smiled through her own tears. Then she opened her arms. Hannah, she whispered gently, I have been waiting for you for 11 years. For a long moment, the world seemed to stand still. The autumn breeze moved softly through the gardens surrounding the farmhouse while Eleanor Whitmore held me in an embrace that somehow felt both familiar and entirely new. I did not understand how that was possible. Yet standing there, surrounded by golden leaves and memories that stretched back farther than I realized, I felt something I had not felt since losing my mother. Connected. When we finally stepped apart, Eleanor smiled and gently touched my shoulder. Your mother talked about you every chance she had. Tears immediately returned to my eyes. She never told me about any of this. Eleanor nodded slowly. Because we promised each other that if the time ever came, you would find the truth on your own terms. Together we walked toward the farmhouse. Adrian followed a few steps behind, giving us space while remaining close enough to remind me I was not facing any of this alone. Inside, the house felt warm and welcoming. Books lined the walls. Photographs filled shelves. Community awards and framed student letters occupied nearly every corner. This was not the home of someone who disappeared from the world. It was the home of someone who quietly continued changing it. Over lunch, Eleanor shared stories I had never heard before. Stories about my mother helping families pay for school supplies. Stories about late-night planning meetings and community projects that grew into statewide programs. Every story revealed another piece of a woman I thought I already knew. By the time afternoon sunlight filled the kitchen windows, I understood something important. The Whitmore Learning Initiative had never been about one person. It had always been about people helping other people. That was the legacy. Not money. Not influence. Purpose. Eleanor eventually led me into a small office overlooking the gardens. On the desk sat several folders. These belong to you now, she said. I looked down. Scholarship reports. Community partnership plans. Expansion proposals. The future of the initiative. My future. I do not know if I can do this. Eleanor smiled. Your mother said you would say that. I laughed through unexpected tears. She knew me too well. She did. Silence settled gently between us. Then Eleanor reached into a drawer and removed one final envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. The paper trembled in my hands as I read. Hannah, if you are reading this, then you found your way home. Trust your heart. Help people when you can. Leave the world a little better than you found it. That will always be enough. I read the note twice. Then a third time. When I finally looked up, Eleanor was smiling. Outside the office window, I could see Adrian standing near the gardens speaking with volunteers from one of the community programs. Even from a distance, his presence felt steady, reliable, the kind of person who quietly made difficult things easier. As the sun began setting beyond the fields, everyone gathered outside. Students from nearby scholarship programs arrived for an annual community celebration. Laughter filled the air. Children ran across the grass. Families shared meals beneath strings of warm lights. The mission my mother helped build was alive, thriving, real. Later that evening, I stood beside Adrian watching the celebration unfold. Quite a journey, he said quietly. I smiled. You could say that. He looked toward me. Are you happy? I thought about the supermarket, the photograph, the messages, the archives, Eleanor, my mother, every unexpected step that brought me here. Then I looked around at the lives being changed because someone cared enough to help. Yes, I answered honestly. I think I finally am. Adrian smiled. The lights glowed warmly across the gardens as night settled around us. For the first time since this story began, the questions were gone. What remained was something far better. A future built on purpose. A legacy built on kindness. And a path forward I no longer had to walk alone.